Oh, okay.
Hi there.
Recording in progress.
Hi, Tiffany. Hi, Yo-Yo.
Hello. How are
Hello. Very good. Thank you. And yourself?
I'm doing well, thanks. Has anything changed since we last got to chat? No, everything's still the same.
No, I think everything's pretty much the same. Sorry, I think it's glitching a little bit.
Now you're gone completely. Now you're kind of back. Tiffany, how are you doing?
Okay,
I'm
come
made.
back.
Uh-oh. Are you there, Yo-Yo?
I can hear you guys, but I don't see anybody.
Okay, there you are.
We see you.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, it's a little bit glitchy. Sorry.
That's okay. So we're this is kind of a going to be an exciting class because I'm going to change some things up um, as we go through. I think what I'm going to do is change around the case study that's for this class, and we're going to add in some digital things that you may never have done before in the program, but that I think are going to have a lot of benefit for you. So one of those things is I'm going to have you develop, and we're going to learn about electronic press kits, um, EPKs. And where do EPKs come into play? Well, they come into play in a lot of different areas. Um, Mainly, though, it's just a video that talks about your brand. And I'll give you more instruction on this as we go, and that'll be your week 4 deliverable. Um, what you'll be doing is putting together a video um, that talks about. I'm going to give you the choice of either your case study brand or your personal brand. And let me see if I've got a couple examples I can give you. Videos on Vimeo. If you hear a lot of noise in the background, we have 2 new puppies. Um, they're baby dachshunds. They're about 2.5 months old, and I've had to have them in the pen most of the day today. So they're uh, in between the last Zoom session and this one. I had them out on the porch, and we also have a border collie that's 6 years old, and we're trying to keep them separated because they're real little nippers right now, and they're fine nipping at each other, but when the collie's not going to recognize the border collie's not going to recognize how hard he can bite, and I'm afraid he can bite one in half if you really want it. Um, but they're in their pen, and I just fed them lunch, so maybe they'll settle down. Uh, and I had them in between the Zoom sessions out there running like crazy on the porch. Um, so I'm hoping I've tuckered them out a little bit. All right, let's see. Where are my videos? It's so funny. Sometimes they sound like little babies out there. I mean, it's just crazy. All right, so what I want is that's not what I wanted. Come on back. Vimeo puts their stuff in such a odd way that these were EPKs that I did for clients, so they're a little bit more elaborate than what I'm looking for, and I'll tell you what we'll be doing um, in a moment. So let me come over here. and I'm going to share my screen. This was for the Hell's Kitchen Foundation. And again, this is a little bit longer, a little bit more elaborate. These clients wanted they wanted not only an EPK, but they wanted a brand story. So the story has some heft to it. There is an area of New York City New Yorkers call Hell's Kitchen. In the early 1900s, it was said that most of the buildings were constructed right after the Civil War. Some of the brownstones were family homes, while others were sliced up into boarding houses. There were also 5- and 6-story walk-up smoke-filled apartment houses, warehouses, and even slaughterhouses. This neighborhood was a bastion to many gangs, hoodlums, crooks, and thieves. In fact, one story on the origin of the name Hell's Kitchen is attributed to a rookie police officer watching a riot on West 39th Street near 10th Avenue, who commented, "This place is hell itself." And the veteran officer responded, "Hell is a mild climate. This is Hell's Kitchen." As time passed, the hoodlums and gangs disappeared, and Hell's Kitchen became a working-class neighborhood. And despite its proximity to Midtown, its gritty past helped to evolve Hell's Kitchen into a modern community with real estate prices below those of other Manhattan neighborhoods. Hell's Kitchen became a home to many in the fine arts community, including actors and visual artists. But wait, have you noticed? Times are a-changing. It's called gentrification. Landmarks such as the Market Diner are being replaced with redevelopment projects. And, like the new buildings, rents are rising, along with the overall cost of living. As a result, visual artists find it difficult to pursue their fine art while struggling to support themselves. As Groucho Marx once said, "Art is art, isn't it? Still, on the other hand, water is water, and east is east, and west is west, and take cranberries and stew them like applesauce. They taste much more like prunes than rhubarb does." Now, you tell me what you know. Well, Mr. Marks, if you live in the neighborhood bound by West 57th Street to the north, West 34th Street to the south, 12th Avenue to the west, and 8th Avenue to the east, and you are a visual artist, in an effort to keep the artist in the kitchen, the Hell's Kitchen Foundation has a great program for you. Picasso once said, "Inspiration does exist, but it must find you working." The Hell's Kitchen Foundation's principle is simple. It wants to find artists working in the kitchen. With no paid staff, the foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit organization, is comprised of a 5-member all-volunteer board. The foundation seeks out new and under-recognized neighborhood talent and provides grants of $500 to $3,500. In addition to providing grants, the foundation also offers Hell's Kitchen artists the opportunity to obtain space at the Hell's Kitchen flea market. Grant winners report that they have used awards to buy art supplies from pencils, paint, ink, and canvases to ceramics, copper, and even a gouache kit or two. Others have used the funds to extend their training and even develop marketing efforts for their art, ranging from photographic assets to complete websites. Foundation Chair Inga Ivchenko said, "We know that living and working as an artist in New York City is increasingly difficult because of the rising cost of living, and it's very moving to meet these artists and learn how dedicated they are to making their art. It's an honor to support them." So, to learn more and to see how you can help spread the word, visit the foundation on the web and come see the artists at the flea market. So, what that movie does is it provides the foundation with background, where they are, where they're situated, how they got there, shows the evolution, and then talks about what they're doing currently. This included some governance and organizational structure information for heavy-duty investors, but this is what you would typically find on a website in the About Pages section. So you'll see this type of video done with bands, with artists, individual branding, corporate branding. but it's another way to tell the story of what's out there. I'll give you my own personal one for my digital media company. If I can just remember where I keep it. You hear the puppies, don't you?
Hi, I'm John Reneski, and I didn't start out to be a filmmaker, or did I? You see, I've been many things over my life, from growing up in the jewelry industry, buying scrap gold during the oil crisis in the 1970s, working in one of the original diamond cutting houses that came over from Belgium at the turn of the 20th century, becoming a vice president and executive for a number of the major jewelry retailers, working for Disney, opening theme parks, implementing technology solutions across the Disney enterprise, and even working on special projects for Michael Eisner. Partnering as the marketing vice president for a screen company, being a professor, and earning a doctorate. But none of these compared to being the husband and father to my wonderful family. You see, as my children started playing sports, a camera magically appeared in my hand, and then a larger camera. And then people asked me to make films of their children. And soon I was reading about Steve Sable and his father and how they had started what is today NFL Films and thought, I can do that. Then other people asked if I could make a film, other sporting events, weddings, tributes, biographies, music videos, and even a commercial or two. So while I never started out to be a filmmaker, the thrill of making a product from scratch, a product that other people enjoy and want to watch, is one of the greatest feelings possible. So today, when I ask the question, where am I as a filmmaker? I'm in the middle part of my journey. I've developed new skills and learned how to get more out of my camera. I don't just make shots. I plan and execute shots. I consider the frame, the composition, the lighting, and ultimately the visual story that I'm telling. And now I've incorporated narrative filmmaking into my repertoire skills. Filmmaking is a journey and a passion to tell stories that move people both visually and conceptually. It is a journey that means no matter where I am today, it is just a launching point for where I need to go tomorrow. Because, as you can see, I'm a filmmaker.
So that's a personal branding story, and it's on my about pages for Osborne Media. So hold on a second, make sure this doesn't come up. I have no idea what it is. At any rate, so by week 4, you're going to be creating a video about your personal brand that you would put on your own personal website. And we're going to talk about the About page and how the About page works in terms of brand awareness and lift. So now you might be saying, how does that fit into public relations? Well, in each of those, you probably heard a number of things, particularly the Hell's Kitchen one, where there were parts of that actually sounded like it was right out of a press release. And what happens is in the About pages on whether it's a corporate website or personal brand website, that page typically is owned by, from a content standpoint, by either executive communications or public relations. Both organizations, some companies it's just called executive communications, and others it's public relations. But that content is speaking to the broader audience. It's not speaking to a target market specifically. The About page speaks to the broader audience. And so as a result, it is typically owned by the folks that control public relations. So I strongly encourage you to do a personal EPK this month, but you have the option if you want to do it for your brand as well. So either case, and then we're going to talk about designing the overall about page as part of the um, public relations communication package that as marketers we should offer. Um, that's a I mentioned that the PR group typically owns the about page. Um, a better question is who owns a website at a company? Is it always marketing or is it other organizations within the company? It depends. Um, in some cases, it's operations. In some cases, it's just straight communications. In others, it is marketing that owns the website. Um, I happened to be at Disney back in the 90s. Actually, it was the early 2000s at that point. And Disney was, think about Disney. How many different websites does Disney have? It's huge. Um, and at the time, Disney was trying to figure out what this thing was that was called the internet. Um, when did when did the World Wide Web really take off? Do you know the date?
Was it in 94?
Yes, it was. How did you know that?
I have a little bit of a background.
Do you know what the seminal event was that marketers look at that happened in 1994?
I can't say that I recall right now.
The first banner ad was
Okay,
launched
yep.
by
Yeah.
AT&T, and the world was introduced to two words that would sell more product than any two words in the history of selling.
Click here.
Click here. Very good, Tiffany. Um, so that was, 1990, and now understand that what got us to that point was bandwidth and modem speed. Because at that point we were operating on 14K modems, and 14K was the speed that was required to be able to load graphic images through the internet. My first modem was 2K, and it's was known as an acoustic coupler. So I would dial up the mainframe computer, and then I'd take my phone and I'd put it in this device that had two nice little cushions, one for the earpiece and one for the mouthpiece, and it would kind of grab it and suck it in, and then all the communication between my screen and the mainframe went over the telephone wires, and it was at a speed of you had to use I actually had a separate device that was almost as big as my computer. It was called an RS-232 interface, and it's what decoded everything and coded it. Um, and that was when I first started working on the internet, which back then it was all green screen, and it wasn't anything close to, it was file transfer. It was um, FTP, was file transfer protocol. There were a couple other file hierarchies. Um, so basically, you were searching for information is the way that the internet was set up. And actually, going back to when um, the original folks that designed the internet, and contrary to popular belief, it wasn't Al Gore. Contrary to popular belief, it wasn't just one person. It actually started as part of the military and then was expanded into civilian use. And a couple of the folks that were responsible for that um, was a gentleman by the name of Moore, who was at Oracle, um, Vincent Cerf. Uh, Contrary to popular belief, that's not where the term surfing the internet came from. But these were some of the real pioneers back then. And eventually, as speed and bandwidth, amount of data that could come through, we got to visual displays, which was in 93, 94. And that's when the first banner ad was run, which was the AT&T ad, and basically um, saying click here. So in terms of where we are in public relations, we are operating in what's known as the earned media channel. And it gets a little bit confusing because we actually operate in a lot of other places too. But what is earned media? Earned media is where other people will tell our story because they think it's newsworthy. And that's a very important concept to remember, that we have to provide newsworthy stories. If it's not newsworthy, nobody else is going to be interested. We will have to pay them, and then we jump from the earned media channel to the paid media channels, and we end up paying for either ads or search or word ads in search. So it's we have to deal with newsworthy stories. We'll talk more about that next week. Let's see. Coming back to the EPK, so we're gonna for week 4, you'll be working on your about page and the EPK, and I'll give you some things to be thinking about as we go through the month, so that it's not happening all just that month. Like, you'll develop a script early on for what you want to say, and I'll give you plenty of links that you can look at for how-tos and stories. Let me ask the two of you, how good are you with making videos?
I'm okay. I actually got my bachelor's at Full Sail for digital cinematography.
Photography, yeah, I remember.
So
Awesome, Yo-Yo. I'm pretty good. I think I'm pretty good.
Okay. So we're not looking for masterpieces, but we do want to have something that's professional. And you don't need a Sony A7. If you
would be
have
nice.
it would be nice. Actually, I've got the DS5 too, X-Cam, and I love it. So, a good smartphone. This happens to be an iPhone 12 Pro, and I had an 11 and I had a 10, and all three of these phones do fabulous video. So, that's really all you want. But you'll want to look at things that you can use for B-roll. B-roll means not filming the primary person that's speaking, and it doesn't have to be film. It can be pictures. In most of the software that's available, like iMovie and so forth, you can apply a very simple, what's known as a Ken Burns effect, which allows makes the picture look like it's actual movie image shot, because it pans over the image. So you can use either images or other things that you shoot in order to tell the story. Now, I'm a filmmaker video. I elected not to use footage about what I was talking about, but rather examples of my filmmaking, so that that was a stylistic way to do that video. I could have easily gone with B-roll of either stills or other items that I shot. And I've actually got versions of those that I've done before, so I wanted this to be strictly of the output. So we've got that going for us, and that'll be for week 4. Week 3, you're going to do your crisis case study report. Week 2, you're going to develop a press release and a distribution strategy for the press release. And the press release has to be about a newsworthy event. So we'll talk more about this next week, but newsworthy events come in 2 forms. There are real events, and then there are, I want to say fake events, but that's not the right word. It's just when you say real, then the opposite is always fake, right? They're called pseudo events. And a pseudo event, most of the news that you watch is a pseudo event. Now, that's different than fake in the sense that fake, I think, has an implication that's just an out and out lie. But pseudo is probably got some exaggerations in it, but it's more encompassing. Where does this term come from? It actually comes from a gentleman, a historian by the name of Daniel Borstein. And he was, for many years, the librarian at the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. He's written many, many books, and if you want a good book to read, which is where the first time the concept, a pseudo event, occurred, was in his book, The Image. And it's not too thick, and it's not full size. So that's Daniel Borstein, The Image. Now, Borstein, he actually looked at what other people had done over the years, and he incorporated that into what he thought was a pseudo event. So let's talk about real events and pseudo events. And I'm not going to talk politics, but I'm going to talk about politics. Okay? So November 3rd was the presidential election.
Right.
Is that an event or is that a pseudo event?
That's an event.
That's an event. It occurs, and actually it's the interesting thing is it started as a pseudo event, but over many, many years, it's now an event. Okay. Let me give you another example. A poll comes out 2 weeks before the presidential election with popularity ratings, and all the print newspapers in the country write a story about it, about what the results of that poll are. Is that an event or a pseudo event?
Pseudo event?
Yeah, why?
Because it's a big deal, but not that big of a deal, I guess.
It's a big deal because they make it a big deal.
Right. But it's not something that's worthy of a election,
Exactly. So I've actually got a video that goes into a lot of detail as to what a pseudo event is. I'm not going to go into that here. But one of the characteristics of pseudo events is that you can take it and use it anytime you want. A pseudo event is it's packageable. So if you want to get attention, just pull that pseudo event off the shelf and run it all over again, and you've got it. Now sometimes it's hard to recreate. I'll give you a little bit of an example that I'll talk again in more detail next week. But in 2018, Anheuser-Busch InBev, they were seeing a continual decline in beer sales. Now, for a mega giant like AB InBev, a point here and a point there, you might think, oh, that doesn't matter. No. Those organizations never want to give up ground. They never want to give up points. That's why when you hear of TV stations and networks and whatnot that are losing ratings, and they're like, oh, we don't care. They care. They care very much. They don't want to give up anything. And so AB InBev, they said, we got to figure out what to do. And they did a ton of research. Remember, marketing, the first thing, the core concept of marketing is research. And research, it all comes back to research. So they started to research, and what did they find? They found that millennials are less likely to drink beer, more likely to drink craft beer, and even more likely to drink spirits. And AB InBev said, well, this doesn't bode well for us because we're really already in the craft beer market. You probably don't realize it, but when I grew up, Budweiser really had two brands, Budweiser and Michelob. And now I could mention a brand to you and you'd say, that's not Anheuser-Busch. So, like Kona. Kona Brewing is Anheuser-Busch. Didn't start out that way, but Anheuser bought it. It's now under the Anheuser label. Landshark. Landshark is Anheuser-Busch. There's about a dozen others. So they kept doing research. They said, we got to find a way that we can get more beer drinkers. And what they did, they found out, the research said that millennials will latch on to any product that they deem as being sustainable and good to the environment. So the geniuses at Anheuser-Busch put on their genius caps and said, we got to figure this out. And what they came up with was a switch in the way they do business. Not really, but that's what they told everybody. And then the second thing they did is they came out with a couple new products. Now, I'm not going to tell you the details right now. We'll get into that next time. So there's a pseudo event that's kind of hard to recreate. Why? Because it was based on the launch of a new product, but the product was based on the research. So we might be able to, if we got another situation, we know how to solve it. We go back to research, and we're going to have to do a couple things and create pseudo events out of them. So in one sense, they've got a method now, and they can recreate a pseudo event. They just can't recreate that because they can't relaunch the same product, and they can't announce the changes that they made for a second time by saying, no, we're really going to do it this time. It's not always repeatable, but for the vast majority of instances, it's repeatable. So that's week 2. Now, the other thing, and I said a distribution plan. If you do marketing, how many times have you felt that you were an advertiser? That you were doing advertising? Advertising is one of the components of the marketing mix. If I were to ask you what the marketing mix is, could you tell me what the 4 Ps are?
Nope.
Okay, so write this down.
Okay.
Because Lord forbid you go for an interview and you get a wise guy like me and says, hey, what are the 4 Ps? And you're like, Peter, Paul, I don't know. Okay, the 4 Ps are product, price, place, and promotion.
I did know that. Wow. Okay.
And then you might have some Weisenheimer that, comes along and says, well, what's the 5th P? And if you're really on your toes, you'll say public relations. So we have the 4 Ps, and promotion is basically advertising. And that's how that fits into the grand scheme of things. I was just looking to see if I have any of my old big time. Oh, they're all the way down there. I've got a couple of advertising economic books. Volume 1 is about that thick. Volume 2 is about that thick. They're huge. Anyway, the advertising is something akin to public relations in the sense that in advertising, what they're doing is they're developing a creative. Now, a creative, what is a creative? Well, a television commercial is a creative. A radio ad is a creative. The artwork for a magazine, the photography, that's creative. Okay, the slogan, the meme, that's all the creative. And in advertising, what happens is you create a creative brief. And in the creative brief, basically what you do is you outline your plan. Who am I targeting this to? What are the, what's the artwork going to look like? What are the design going to look like? What is the outcome that we're talking about? So you're laying everything out in the creative brief as to how you're going to use that creative. And that's so that other people that need to approve it can give a green light. Surprisingly, at Disney, we didn't have a set process for a long time. And one of my first jobs in organization development was the development of what became known as the mega process. And what mega was, it was a set meeting, and it was chaired by the 3 senior VPs of the marketing department. Marketing was organized. There was an executive VP was Linda Warren, and then there were 3 senior VPs, one of which was the VP for our internal advertising agency called Yellow Shoes. Yellow Shoes being Mickey's Yellow Shoes. And then there were 2 other senior VPs. And then there were a couple more VPs that sat, or that had the title VP, and then a number of directors. Well, the mega meeting was, I'm trying to remember whether it was every Thursday or every Wednesday. It was a weird day. And the 3 senior VPs were permanent members of the committee. Other VPs and directors would rotate in and out during different periods of the year and so forth. And of course, with business travel and other obligations, sometimes those 3 senior VPs weren't always there together. Sometimes there'd be 2, sometimes there had to be at least 1. If one couldn't be there, there was no mega meeting. That I can't remember an instance of where that happened. And what you would do is you would take your creative brief and you'd go and pitch it. And if the mega council gave you a green light, then you could go and develop it to the next step. Now, what's interesting is the first pitch you made was just based on the executive summary. So you'd go pitch your executive summary for your creative brief, and if they gave you a thumbs up, you went back and developed the rest of the creative brief, and then you come back and pitch the whole creative brief. And then they might say, well, yes, we're going to give you the green light for this part. Let us see what it looks like after you do X, Y, and Z. You'd go and do X, Y, and Z, come back and present again. So you might actually go through the process 3 or 4 times, maybe even 5 times by the time that your campaign or project was ready to run. The distribution plan works the same way. Here's the kicker, though. We don't have a creative brief in public relations. Our creative is actually our newsworthy event and our press release. And what we want to be able to do with that is we want to take that press release, and we want to find a whole bunch of ways that we can use it and distribute it. In some instances, we're going to use new media. We're going to put it on social media. We're going to take information from it and put it on social media channels. We should always, mark that down, always distribute through a wire service, no matter how big or how small your organization is. And there's lots of different wire services to choose from expensive to free. But there's a reason for doing that, and that is because the wire service indexes your press release, meaning that it can now be searched. And it will add to your SEO results for your company's website. So we have a newsworthy event that we've created or identified, and now we're developing different ways that we can take the press release, which is the main creative, cut it up and use it in different ways to communicate with our public and our audiences. And that's what you talk about in the distribution plan. You talk about the main distribution on the press release, but then also all the ancillary places as well. So that's week 2. And then this week, what do we talk about? Well, I want you to provide the strategic context of your case study company. Now, this is not necessarily your case study company is the one that you've been using all the way through your program. In week 3, when you pick a crisis and you do a crisis case study, the crisis, whatever crisis you choose, that's going to tell you which company to use. So that's different there, just FYI. You want to tell us in basically you're going to have 2 sections and combined into one video that's no longer than 6 minutes long. Now, I actually give you a 30-second buffer. So if you run 6:30, you don't lose any points. But if you run longer than 6:30, you lose points. The art of public relations is about being concise. Okay? The first part of the video, you want to talk about the strategic context of your case study company. Now, I don't expect you to have to do a whole lot of research on that. A little bit, but you've really been talking this almost in every class. I know I asked you back in new media for some of this, and it's important because public relations is what's known as a boundary organization. When I say organization, I mean within the bigger organization, obviously. But if I draw a circle, and I'm not going to put a happy face in it, but that's my organization, okay? It's a circle. And then I'm going to take it and I'm going to put intersecting lines. And what I've just done is created 4 quadrants within my organization. Now I'm going to do something else. I'm going to draw another circle at the very center. And I'm going to start putting people in place. Who do you think is in the very center circle?
Like the head?
Yeah, the CEO, president. We'll just call this the C-suite. So public relations has 2, you can't see, there you go, 2 responsibilities. They have to handle the communication that comes from the C-suite into the organization. Now, if you're just a small, if you're a small company, 10, 15 people, a lot of times we just think, oh, everybody knows what's going on. And that's not the case. So communication is important. When I was in the screen business, we had 15 employees. And my partner, who was the president, he was as tight-lipped gets. And he didn't want to share what was going on one side of the business to the other side of the business to the other side. And who became the communicator? Me. And I started to break down all those barriers. So in essence, I was acting as the boundary between him and the rest of the company. So that's public relations job there. And then out here, we have the audience of the corporation. The audience of the corporation is anybody that the corporation has the ability to speak to. Now, here's another difference between marketing and public relations. In marketing, we don't think of audiences unless we're talking about target audiences. We don't talk about target audiences in public relations. We just speak about audiences. It's the universe of everybody that we could possibly talk to. Whereas in marketing, we're only talking to those people that we identify as we can provide utility and benefit through our product and services. So in public relations, we're talking to many, many, many more people. Now, the reason I broke this down into quadrants So I've got inputs and outputs. I've got planning and I've got maintenance. And for years, I did organization development work. You'll never see a org chart that looks like that. But that's a very, very high level, basic picture of what any organization looks like. In other words, on one side, we're bringing in stuff and we're making something. And the waste of that, this is a really bad way to think of it, but it's true. The waste of what we brought in and played with becomes the products that we sell. Okay? So where I have output on this little diagram, you can think of sales and marketing. Input is manufacturing. Maintenance is almost everybody else in the company that's required in order to make the product work. That's not directly involved with manufacturing or the supply chain. Who might that be? Well, it's human resources, it's accounting, it's any of those type of organizations. And then planning are the people that actually do the forecasting and planning for the organization and really set the business direction from the number standpoint. The reason I break this out is because outside, so remember, we got the little tiny circle, and then we've got the bigger circle, and then out here we have all the audiences. At the border between the inner circle and the outer circle, that's the employees. And public relations communicates with them. And then at the outer edge of the big circle to the rest of the world, public relations talks there. But there are specific audiences. So, for example, think about this. How important is it for an organization to have a good reputation in order for it to attract new employees? It's huge, right? People are not going to go to work where a company has a bad reputation. So that's just one audience that we pay attention to. You know, in finance, there may be certain things that we need in order to make finance work properly, software and so forth. So there are supply chains in each of those departments, each of those organizations. And it's important that we have good reputation with each of those suppliers. I'm looking for something real quick. I may have it and I may not. I'm thinking for a moment. I was doing some house cleaning um, a little while back, and it's something that I had created back in the '80s, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna have to start using that. And now I can't remember what the heck I did with it. One last look here, real quick. Okay, so what it was back in the '80s, I took over operations of a 60 store retail jewelry chain, and the chain had a horrible reputation. It's probably why I was able to get the job, because I was pretty young at the time. And the company had a really bad reputation. Mall developers didn't want to do business with us. Strip center developers barely wanted to do business with us. And I was tasked with changing the face, the appearance of the company. And I didn't have a whole lot to work with. I'll tell you, when I came in, our stores were as ugly gets. You'd never want to buy jewelry in them. And I worked very hard with a couple of developers, and finally got a shot to go into a mall that was being redeveloped. And I built our first real mall store. And what I did, I used that store then to talk about the renaissance of the company and what our direction was and where we were going in the future. And I did it by building a brochure. And that brochure was a product of public relations, because we were looking at many more audiences than it wasn't going to our consumers. This was going to all the people that we dealt with in the world in order to do business. So from our suppliers, our merchandise suppliers, to our potential future landlords, it had wide impact. And as I would go through the brochure, I used to tell people, this is my dog and pony show, but it worked. We were able to, we started to get much more favorable terms when we bought merchandise. I actually had built so many mall stores. By the time I left, I was actually beginning to wonder if I shouldn't go back to strip centers because of the lower rents. Rents in malls were going through the roof. You basically had to have $1 million store before you broke even. Compared to when I came on board, my average store was doing $300,000. So we made major improvements, but it was because of public relations efforts like that. And again, normally when you think of public relations, you think either of a spokesperson, or you think of a press release. But there's other public relations writing and other things that have to come into play. Now, I didn't write the brochure, but I designed it, and it was executed by, I just turned everything over to my marketing director, who made it all come together, and she did a fabulous job, to the point that I'm still friends with her today. And that was, 40 some years ago. At any rate, that's what we want to do, is understand all those relationships. And that's the strategic context that I ask you to talk about. So typically when a company talks about strategy, they talk about a number of elements. What's the mission of the company? Now, mission can be answered by 3 questions. So write these down. These are important questions. Why does the organization exist today? For whom does it exist? And to what extent? Now, if you want to look at a great mission statement, even though I'm not a fan of Nike, I can't stand their shoes because when you sweat in them, they smell like cat urine. But if you want to look at a great mission statement, go research Nike's mission statement. in about 11 words, it answers all three questions. So, extremely well done. Beware of mission statements that don't speak to what the company does. Years ago, when I used to teach, uh, I used to run strategy workshops for Disney, and there was this really cool little widget on the internet called Dilbert's mission statement. You all know who Dilbert is? Little cartoon character, talks.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Um, his comics are all about the idiocracy of corporate America. Well, he had a mission statement generator, and you could just tap the button and it would generate a mission statement. And a lot of companies' mission statements sounded very, very similar. I haven't looked at it in a while, but Wendy's was one. If you go and look at, let's do that together, just for fun, right? We got a few minutes. So I'm going to share this screen, and we're going to go Wendy's. They've improved this a little bit, but not much.
I
Here we
have
go.
a question because you just pulled this up and I noticed it had vision and mission statement. Are some companies, I believe they mesh them together?
No, they're separate. They should always be separate, and the reason being is vision is who you want to be in the future. It's not why you exist today. There's a very distinct difference. Mission has to answer the question, why does this company exist today? Okay? So here, I'm going to read you Wendy's mission statement. They say, as a global business, oh no, that's not it. Where'd I see it? Here we go. Wendy's mission statement: to deliver superior quality products and services for our customer and communities through leadership, innovation, and partnerships. How many different companies could that be a mission statement for?
All of them.
Yeah, it it's horrible, and they've had it like this for decades. Um, because this, it doesn't say why they exist. Um, Obviously, Wendy's exists to sell burgers and Frosties. Um, so, this is one that's really pretty poorly written. But if you look at, oh, all right, I won't make you do the work. I'll do it. Nike. Okay, Nike's mission statement is to bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete in the world. So if I ask you, why do they exist today? It's to bring inspiration and innovation. To whom? To every athlete. To what extent? The world. So their mission statement answers all three questions. And notice you don't get to the point that they're really doing sports wear until the middle part when it's to whom. So why they exist um, is they exist to do the innovation and the what else did I say? I forget it now. Inspiration, uh, which actually ties back to their positioning statement. You remember what their positioning statement is? A positioning statement oftentimes is a tagline, and a lot of times the tagline is linked to either the vision or the mission. But in Nike's case, their tagline is simply just do it. And the way this works back is that Nike is taking care of the innovation and the inspiration component. So you don't have to worry about it. You just have to take what they produce and go do it. They've taken care of the hard stuff, is what the message is. Okay? And that's how those two work together. Now, did I see? Let me see if they got the vision statement pulled out. Nike's vision statement is to do everything possible to expand human potential. See how open-ended that is? That's really laying them out for the future. That's saying on the horizon, we just want to keep doing more and more to develop human potential. So vision statements are less mechanical. Positioning statements are less mechanical. Mission statements have a very specific job. Why do you exist today? For whom and to what extent? Okay? Now, there's a couple other aspects of strategy that is important to understand, and that is when we talk about strategic context, we often also talk about the critical success factors, and we also talk about their values. So values, and by the way, you may find this hard to believe, but how do companies typically put together their mission statement and their core values and everything?
With their goals.
Well, the goals will typically come out of that, but I'm in terms of the people process. How do these things happen?
Oh, the vision and the mission statement.
Yeah, and the values and things like that.
That would it come from the C-suite?
Yeah, it does. It comes from the chief executive officer or the president or the owner of the company. Now, if they're a good leader, they get buy-in, and they'll set a general direction, and then have their team refine it and put all the detail in. But ultimately, that direction, that strategic direction, comes from whoever in charge. That's why they're in charge. If Michael Eisner just left the direction of the company to his executives, be helter skelter. And it's the executive, the top executive that sets that direction. Now, when I took over the jewelry company, there were 3 vice presidents, myself being one, and we had an owner. And fortunately, even at a very young age of, like I said, I think I was either 24 or 25, I was always a pretty good salesperson. So I was able to sell the boss, the owner, on what we needed to do. Our first strategic planning session occurred because 2 weeks after I was on board at the company, I was still visiting stores. I hadn't been to all the stores yet. And the boss came to me and said, I need your operations budget in the next week. And I said to him, I said, fine, let me see the strategic plan. He said, oh, we don't have one of those. I said, well, then we're going to have to learn how to do a strategic plan, and you're going to have to learn to be a better communicator. I was a lot smoother back then, but that was the essence of what I said. And then the entire executive team, which was 4 of us, we did a off-site 4-day retreat at Hilton Country Club in Lexington. It was very nice. I managed that really well. So anyway, those are some of the key elements. Now, I also want you to take a look at and share your understanding of the customer and the overall business environment. So that includes competition. Who's the customer? Who's the competition? and what's the overall business environment that you're operating in. Is it a B2B? Is it a B2C? Um, and you know all this. Like I said, there's not a lot of research. Uh, you've probably done a SWOT or a PESTLE analysis in one of your other classes. Unless something dramatic has changed, those are going to be good. And then the last item that you need is the identify who the stakeholders are. Now, this is a little test because I want you to read the material that I've provided, but I'll tell you right now who stakeholders are, and I guarantee you how many people we have in class. I imagine at least 3 are going to give me the wrong answer, even when I'm going to tell it right now. So a stakeholder is somebody who can influence the direction, the performance of a company, and it's also somebody that their life can be influenced by the company. It's a symbiotic relationship. Now, stakeholder sounds a lot like stockholders. So the question is a stockholder a stakeholder? The answer is yes. The fact that person has a financial interest in the company means they can impact that company theoretically. And the performance of the company can impact the stockholder. But going the other way around, is a stakeholder a stockholder? Not unless they buy stock. Okay? So stakeholders are people that are my diagram here. The stakeholders are both the people in the C-suite, they're the employees that are in the larger circle, and it's anybody in any of the quadrants that can be impacted by something that the company does, or they do something that can impact the company. So a stakeholder is an important concept to master, and that's why it's part of the presentation. I want to see, make sure everybody's on the same page as far as that goes. But I just gave you the answer.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
For that same concept for the stakeholders, does stakeholders, because they're technically the people that show, I guess, interest in your company, would that also include the company's community, like its customers?
Yeah. The
Okay.
customers are very definitely a stakeholder. But it's also the guy that drives the truck that brings the supplies to the business.
Okay.
It's also the unemployed accountant that's sitting home that may be a fan of the company, and hasn't decided whether or not to seek employment with the company yet. They could be a stakeholder.
Okay.
So potential employees are stakeholders. Okay? The guy that picks up the trash from the plant and hauls it away to the dump, he's a stakeholder. Because if he doesn't pick up the trash, it piles up. And they have a problem. They have a problem that if the trash piles up too much, then the people that live near the plant have a problem. And they can create a problem for the company too. So people that live in a proximity to a plant, they're stakeholders. They could be stakeholders because they could also be potential employees too. So stakeholder is a very broad concept, and you just want to be real clear in doing a thorough analysis as to, if you miss an area, that's fine. But you want to be as inclusive as you can to identify as many possible stakeholder groups as you can. Because later on, when you have a crisis, one of the things that you do is a stakeholder analysis. How is this crisis going to affect different stakeholders? And what's the impact going to be? What's the impact going to be to the employees that are working within the company? What's the impact going to be to the people that live near the main headquarters? What's the impact going to be to the supply people? So you need to ask all those questions when you have a crisis and do a thorough stakeholder analysis. And you'd also want to do that for any major change that the organization might be making. So if an organization gets much more favorable tax benefits in a neighboring state and decides they're going to close down the plant. But they say, oh, we'll offer jobs to everybody. No, a lot of those people don't move because they're part of the community. And so the company has now seriously damaged its stakeholder group that are in the geographic proximity of the company. So then the second part of the video, I ask you to set up a monitoring system. And the monitoring system, what you're looking for, and the way you set it up, I don't want you to go to Google every day and have a list of keywords that you're Googling, or binging, or go ducking, whatever it may be. I want you to have some automation in place so that you're getting information that you can look at in as easy a way as possible. So I talk about the fact that there are a couple tools: Feedly, NetVibes, Hootsuite. You can use TweetDeck for Twitter. You can use Google Alerts. Now, the one I like the most is Feedly, but there's a ton of others. There's Social Mention, there's Sprout. I mean, the number that are out there for monitoring is huge. But you want to monitor RSS feeds and you want to monitor socials. Do you know what an RSS feed is?
Is it like news feeds or like live
Yeah,
feeds?
RSS stands for really simple syndication, and it's a way to tag a story so that it gets picked up on numerous services and feeds, and so it's automated. And so not all the time, but a lot of blogs, when they write a blog, they RSS it, and you can subscribe to the RSS feed, and then you're getting their blog stories on a regular basis. Now, Feedly is a aggregator, meaning it pulls everything in. It's like a big vacuum cleaner. It just sucks all the RSS feeds in. You have to set it up and tell it which ones that you want. Feedly, NetVibes, Hootsuite, they all have free versions and they have paid versions. Back when this course was new, the free versions were massive. You could do lots of things. Today, they're not so. But they still provide some functionality. I only pay for these when I have a client that wants the service. So other than that, I just use the free version. It's a little bit more work for me. I got to go a couple different places and do different things. Like with the paid version, you can integrate Hootsuite and Feedly together. You can integrate your Google Alerts, so it's all coming one place, automatically sorting into folders and whatnot. That's all nice. On a budget, I just do it myself. So you want to set up, you want to have folders that you have stuff going to, whether it's in Feedly, in Hootsuite, or NetVibes. What you want is you want a folder that captures information on your industry. You want a folder that captures information on competitors. You want a folder that captures information on the company itself, the company that's your case study company. And again, whether these are folders that are in each of the different platforms, because you're not paying for it, you're not going to be integrated, that's fine. But I just want to see that you've got some level of automation happening. You also want to have a folder set up for your customers. Take a look at the persona that you developed and how can you set up a feed for that. Now, in some instances, you actually got to go to, so let's say that your client, hold on a second, I'm losing my voice. This is going on hour 4, I think. Got a mustache, I bet. A white one. There you have real authenticity. You know, the university would like us to hold up a newspaper to show the date, proof of life. Um, you got a milk mustache. Um, the you might have to go to specific industry trade magazines that you know of and search for those industry trade magazines. Um, you may, so in other words, you may have to go out and specifically look, and it won't automatically find based on your keyword search. So just be aware of that. But the idea is that you've got some sort of automated system. Now, TweetDeck, I love TweetDeck. But, you know, it's something that depending on the day, if I'm doing monitoring, I have it up and I just have it running. And what I can do is I can set up different searches in TweetDeck. And so I fill columns with search parameters for things that I'm looking for on Twitter.
Professor Reneski, I have a question in regards to that. Like TweetDeck,
Uh-huh.
um, don't you have to have access to the company in order to monitor that type of uh, information? You don't?
No, TweetDeck works a lot like Google Alerts. You're just searching on keywords.
Okay.
Now, for Hootsuite, you have to have access to the account unless you have a paid account, and paid account will get you not complete company access, but get you more access than you can if you just have the free account. And so that's something to be aware of with Hootsuite. And but there, like I said, for social media monitoring, there are a ton of companies out there, and don't go down the rabbit hole too deep. I find that occasionally I use Sprout Social, but mostly I'm using Feedly, I'm using TweetDeck, and I'm using Google Alerts and Hootsuite, the free version. Okay. So what I ask you to do is show me a video of how you set that up. Just explain, you know, these are the folders I've got. I'm getting some information in. But do that fairly early in the next day or so. The reason being, I want you to actually use the data that you're collecting for the second part of the video, or the second part of the video. And what I want you to do is to tell me 3 things that you've learned from your data. Now, again, this is one of those freebies I'm going to give you. Somebody is going to tell me right up front that they learned that their company doesn't post enough social media, or they don't have a Facebook account, and my head's just going to explode. Those are not learnings from monitoring. We should know that from working in the company. We don't have a Facebook account. We need to create a Facebook account. If I have to monitor Facebook to see that I'm not there, then there's something wrong. No, what are we looking for? We're looking for 3 types of information. You're looking for any potential crisis, anything that could harm your company. So you want to keep an eye out for something along the lines of that. You know, in today's environment, it might be something that has to do with COVID. That could be a potential crisis. It could be, it could be something. We live in a very dangerous time, I think, from a standpoint of how much, as marketers, we're invested in Facebook and Google. You realize Google owns 94% of the search activity in the world.
Yes.
What if Google, for some reason, maybe it's even a mistake, they think your company is bad, and they kick your company off YouTube, they kick your company off of from any searches. They don't allow you to advertise through Google Ads, and now you're left with Bing, and Bing has like 4% of the global search activity. Or what if somebody takes a nuclear missile and hits all the servers where Google is, and Google just disappears. What are we going to do as digital marketers? These are the nightmares that I have. Because look at how much we've invested in Google, in Facebook. I mean, traditional advertising has really gone away for the most part. I mean, look at the Super Bowl and how few people actually advertised at the Super Bowl. Super Bowl and advertising was the World Series. I used to sit there at halftime with my notepad and take notes. And you know, it's everything has moved to digital. But when we say that, everything has moved to Google or Facebook. Facebook. How many monthly active users are on Facebook in the United States alone? 219 million. Globally, 2.9 billion people are on Facebook. What if Facebook goes away? Boy, you're going to talk about a real mental health crisis for a lot of people. They're not going to know what to do. Think of all those Farmville farms that are going to go down the tube. There's nobody to pick my potatoes. Actually, I think Farmville's long dead, but you get the drift. Anyway, I worry about that. These are the things that keep me up at night. But things that we should consider. Okay. The next thing that we want to take a look at instead of a crisis is what's our competition doing that we can steal? See, in new media, I taught you how to be a stalker, right? And now I'm teaching you corporate espionage. No, I'm not. If anybody's listening out there and monitoring my communications, it's a joke. What are we doing? We want to see if there's anybody out there in the industry or possibly our direct competitors, and if they've done any pseudo events that we might be able to borrow and twist a little bit. Now, I'll give you an example. When I worked in the Diamond District in New York, every lunch, I couldn't wait to get out of the factory. I hated the factory. I would lunchtime, I'd go out, and our street was right on the border of Rockefeller Plaza. So our building was 48 West 48th Street, and Rockefeller Plaza ran a long way. And what I would do is I would cut through the courtyard, and within a minute, I'd be right there at the ice skating rink at Rockefeller Plaza, if you've ever seen any movies. And that's where I would usually stop at the deli right next to our building and get a sandwich, and then I'd go eat the sandwich and watch whatever was going on in either the skating rink or whatnot. And then I would walk up Fifth Avenue, and I would hit three places. I'd hit Harry Winston's jewelry store, I would hit Fortunoff's jewelry store, and I would hit Tiffany's. And I wouldn't always go in. I'd just look at the windows a lot of times, and I would see what was new. And digital cameras didn't exist then. I had to use my mind and my memory. And then what I'd do is, as I'd walk away, I'd pull out my notepad and I'd make a few sketches and a few notes, and I'd usually come back to my my model maker in the factory, and he was a Chinese gentleman who spoke no English. You talk about learning how to communicate in bizarre ways. But oh my God, in terms of a model maker and a designer, you know, he'd look at what I drew and he'd make it in less than a couple of hours. And what I would do is I would change some of the stones. I might change, so instead of emeralds, I might do sapphires, or vice versa. I might change a little bit of the positioning. But the basic idea I got from looking at my competitors. weren't very many trademarks in the industry back then, and even today, I don't think that a trademark would or a patent would hold on it, particularly a patent because it wasn't mechanical. But that's what you're doing in a digital manner by looking and saying, have any of these guys, any of these competitors, have they run anything that is a pseudo event that I can either borrow, evolve, or maybe it just gives you an idea. You know, you saw this, and instead of thinking A for apple, you looked at the A for apple and said, asparagus. We're going to do asparagus. Um, so it's just a matter of you want to use this tool to idea spot. Okay. The last item. So you're doing idea spotting. You're doing crisis intervention. And the last thing is you're looking for stories and content that you can curate and that you can then share through your social media channels with your broader audience. Back in the day, I used to run political campaigns for judicial candidates. Now, judges technically are no official party, and what they can say in campaigns is very, very limited. And for the most part, the way people select judges, unless something terrible has happened, is they select judges based on name recognition. And back then, before the internet, the way that we would build name recognition, it's still used today, but to a much lesser extent, is direct mail. So when you go to your mailbox during election time and you see all the election pieces coming in, I was a major part of that at one point in time. To gain name recognition in a circuit judge's district, which is real close to the size of a congressional district, you have to hit that mailbox at least 12 times over the length of the campaign. If you want to position your candidate above their opponent, and their opponent is advertising, you need to hit probably at least 23, 24 pieces of mail. So that's communication. And in each one of them, I used to have, okay, this one will be, this one is about the spouse, this one is about the family, and I had a whole plan. They were all different pieces. And what you end up doing is you want to get into the 23, 24 range. But here's the problem. If your opponent is sending out 23, 24 pieces, all you're doing is everybody is recognizing everybody, and then it kind of gets to the quality of the content. But, you know, depending on how much money the campaign has, you may then try to outspend your opponent by going 10, 15% more in mailers. Again, really reinforcing all the points that you want. Well, creating all those messages, so that's what we're doing with whenever we post in social media, is that you're creating awareness, brand awareness, and expertise in your particular segment of the industry, that people know they can go to your Facebook or your blog or whatever it may be and find good, solid information without you having to constantly write new stuff. You're just curating and passing it on. And hopefully somebody passes it on from you, because the best currency in the world is the share when you talk social media. So that's what we're looking at in terms of what I want you to learn. So, you know, find me 2 or 3 pieces that you can curate and repurpose in your social media channels, or find me, find me a potential crisis along with some curated material, or even better yet, come up with a couple of pseudo events that you can do as a result of monitoring. That's a lot to ask of you for this week. You got to get the system up and then use it. But I'm only looking, if you have 2, that's great. I don't take points off. I take points off for the quality. And if you have 3, that's great too. Okay? But if you come back and tell me, oh, I learned that we don't have a social media presence, that would be bad. All right, that's a lot of talking on my part. What questions do you have for me?
I have a question concerning the week 1 assignment.
Uh-huh.
So looking at the deliverables. So the first portion is basically the 3-minute portion is an introduction to our company, right?
It's just,
Answering.
yeah,
Sorry.
it's a strategic context, the layout.
Okay. And then the part 2 is where we put the everything that has to do with the competitors. So which is where the RSS comes in, or
Yeah.
the RSS is part 3.
No, there's only 2 parts. But the second part has 2 components to it.
Oh, okay.
So you want to show me your monitoring system, what it looks like. You can do that through screen capture video. You can do it through screenshots if you want. And then the second part is what did the data tell you? What things did you learn from the data from the system?
Okay.
And that's either going to be an idea for a newsworthy event, curated material, or potential crises.
Okay. Yeah, because I know for a fact that, for example, in part 2, part 3, that even if I did start going through that, my company has not actually focused on what is social media and all of that. They don't. I mean, you could say their online presence, overall website, and all of that is fairly new. So I think which brings me to my next question. In this case, then, if they don't have those, um, they don't have very many social media mentions. They don't have very much like news leading towards the company overall. Would then that be where I would explain then where they can get that kind of stuff from?
Now, then what you want to do is you want to go to competitors and see what things are potential to competitors, and if what ideas you can gain from the competitors.
Okay.
Yeah,
Awesome.
because if somebody's a competitor, they're gonna face the same potential crises. They're gonna, there may be some unique ones, but generally speaking, um, you're able to see um, uh, not only the crisis, but what information is being shared that you can then curate as well, and repurpose.
Right.
So, not having,
So kind of like you're kind of like leeching, right? I
yeah,
guess in a sense you could say it's like leeching.
yeah,
Okay.
you're just benchmarking. Well, benchmarking or just using them for your basis, for what you're coming up with is what you're doing. I mean, again, if they're a competitor, they're probably going to be pretty similar to you. Um, and so that's a good place to go look for all this. If your company, you know, a lot
Okay.
of times
Awesome.
you'll look for potential crisis in your own social media. Um, the trying to remember if it was this class. Sometimes my discussion post between new media and this class. Did I have you guys look at the Nestle video? Was that in new media, or is it in this class?
I don't remember.
If not,
I don't recall seeing a Nestle
I'll
video.
have to take a look. It's a great video because she goes through she talks about Nestle and their posts and the way they respond with clients, or with their followers, and there's just so much potential crisis that's just laying there from their own customers. So sometimes your own social media is a place where you can go, but you know you want to be looking for crisis in a number of different places. That's why looking at industry publications and so forth are important too. Okay. Trade mags are big. I get, just because um, I'm wired that way. I get uh, the Navy News, which is a trade pub for the United States Navy, and I get a defense and space trade magazine, because I'm still a rocket geek when you get right down to it. Um, but I look at those industry mags, and I'm amazed at sometimes some of the information that's in there. And I always look to see, is there an implication to um, the culture beyond what the industry says? So uh, there's a lot of the idea is that there's a ton of information out there. You just need to go look for it. Okay. One of the things I'm trying, in other words, like not having any still developing and growing your social media for your case study company. That's an operational issue. It's not a marketing issue. It's just like when I see people in new media and they say one of their goals is to launch a new website, and I'm like, no, that's marketing operations. That's not marketing. Um, that website, just because you have it doesn't mean anything. Um, you know that you're launching a lead generation campaign through the website now. That's a goal we can put some numbers to. So that's really what I'm trying to get you away from, is any of those operational type of learnings. They're important, but not here. Okay. Any other questions?
I think I have one question in regards to our group. Um, I think it's Wednesday, tomorrow. We're supposed to write up oh goodness, what is it? Um, uh, like our values or something like that, or
Well,
either,
let me stop you for a moment. Have you formed a group yet?
yes, we just got our group together this morning. Well, formally this morning.
Okay. How many people in it?
There are 4.
All right. I'm gonna rewrite the instructions,
Okay.
and you don't have to submit that.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Fantastic. Okay.
It
Thank
it
you.
it wasn't a graded assignment, but it did impact the grade if the group had problems when the case study was submitted. Um, and probably going forward, I probably won't even make this a group assignment if you don't want it. Right now it's an optional group assignment, but I'll probably take that option away in the future and just have you all do individual. I believe I'm the only instructor in the master's program that still has a group assignment. Have you had any other group assignments?
No.
Yeah. Group assignments work well when you get a group that's been together for a long period of time. My MBA was an executive MBA, and we really only had over the 30, it was a 36-month program. We only had we had one major switch, which was about halfway through, and that was because at the halfway point, the MBAs turned into focused MBAs into specific areas of interest. So our group was mainly made up of technology focused, but we had one that was getting a healthcare MBA, and so she came out of the group, and then we picked up another person that had been in a group that probably the same thing. They were probably all healthcare MBAs, and he was the one technology guy, and we picked him up. That was the only change that we had in the group in 36 months. We exchanged a person, so we knew how to work together. As a matter of fact, about 6 months before the end of the program, one of the original members of the group, um, he came to us and said, "Hey, I've been talking about opening this business. We're actually going to launch it next month and open it." And we thought he was crazy, but he'd been a good contributor all the way through. And we told him, we said, "Look, if you run into problems on any of the group work, we've got you covered. Can't do your individual assignment for you, but if you run into an issue on any given week on a group assignment," every week we had a group assignment. Every week, our overall grade for the MBA was 40% group and 60% individual. So we told him, just let us know in advance that you're not going to be able to do, contribute, and we'll cover you. Now, if that had happened, second course, third course into the program, would have tossed him on his rear end right out the door. But at this point, we knew that we wanted to help our team member along, and that's what teams do. And it was only because we knew how to work together by that point in time that we could do those kind of things. So having one class where you have a group project is almost counterproductive, but that's why I asked if you'd already formed a group. If you want to continue to do it as a group, you got my blessing. It'll be due in week 3. That's the one change. But if you want to do it as an individual, you can do it as an individual too. So that'll give you a chance to rethink it. And the benefit of doing it as a group, just FYI, is this case study crisis project is actually kind of fun. So you get some good discussions about what really caused the crisis and so forth. I'll talk more about the actual case study, what you're going to produce next week. So you'll have that for you. Okay?
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. That was a good question, Tiffany. All right, folks. Have a great rest of your day and great rest of your week. And reach out if you need anything. Text me, 407-267-8600.
All right.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
You have a good one too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.